Good afternoon. I'm Nariman Farvardin, Dean of the Clark School of Engineering. I'd like to welcome all the faculty, staff, students from across the campus, friends from outside the campus, to our second lecture in the Whiting-Turner Lecture Series on Business and Entrepreneurship. Many of you are regulars in this lecture series, so I'm not going to take a lot of time explaining the idea behind the lecture series, but this is a lecture series that we started actually more than a decade ago, and the objective of this lecture series is to provide opportunities for our students and faculty members and for the community to spend time with people who have had a successful career in essentially the corporate world, who are familiar with the business and entrepreneurship challenges of the real world. And as you have seen, we have had a variety of very distinguished speakers in the recent past, people who have built companies from scratch and have made them multi-billion-dollar companies, people who have come from small startup companies, people who have been at the helm of companies that remained a small startup for 15 years before they became a billion-dollar companies, as well as companies that became a billion-dollar company over a couple of years. And I think all of these talks have had different flavors, and our objective is to create a culture among our students and our faculty where they constantly think about the business aspects and the entrepreneurial aspects of engineering, and quite frankly, to learn something from these lectures and apply them to their careers at some point in the future. I do want to take advantage of this opportunity, as I always do, to thank our very good friends at Whiting-Turner Contracting Company. This is a company that does a lot for the School of Engineering. They're one of the greatest friends of the school, and this lecture series is one of many activities that they sponsor. Today we have Mr. Bob Ryan, our good friend and Senior Vice President of the company. Bob, could you please stand so that we can all recognize you, represent the company. Thank you very much. And I wanted to tell you, it's rather unusual for a representative from a company to come tell me, when can I send you a check? I mean, it's usually the other way around. But Bob just came to me and he said, are you ready to accept a check for this lecture series? And I said, why don't you hold off for a couple of weeks? So anyway, thank you so much for everything that you do for us. I really appreciate it. I am going to give you a somewhat more formal introduction about our speaker, Ms. Kathy Hill, Senior Vice President at Cisco. But before doing that, I'd like to ask my very good friend, Tom Scholl, who is also the chairman of the Engineering Board of Visitors and a great supporter of this lecture series, somebody who works extremely hard to try and identify speakers such as Kathy for us. He's been doing it for a year and a half now. Since Tom has known Kathy for a number of years, he wanted a minute to say a few words that come from his heart. Tom, could you please come forward?
Thank you, Nariman, and thank you all for coming tonight. I think you're going to have a very, very enjoyable time. I've worked with Kathy at Hughes Network Systems some time back. I've known her for about 20 years. She is a consummate engineer and also a business person. She's worked at both large and small companies, and she's been successful in both, which I find to be pretty rare and not easy to do, by the way. She's now a Senior Vice President. She's responsible for billions of dollars of business in Ethernet switching and wireless networking equipment. And what's interesting is when I first talked to Kathy, you know, we had our friend Bob Metcalf here to give a talk about his invention of Ethernet and his founding of the company 3Com. I think it was an exciting speech. And Kathy, when I first mentioned this to her, she said she thought she would like to talk to you a little bit about, okay, well, what happened after that at a company like Cisco? What have they been doing with Ethernet since that time? One of the things I mentioned to Kathy is, you know, you've been so successful in your career, Kathy, now. You are such a nice person. You've got lots of people working for you. What's the next thing you want to spend your time on? And I thought she might say, well, I'm going to spend more time playing golf and things like this. And she said, you know, Tom, I would really like to spend some time thinking about women in engineering and how to attract women to the engineering profession better. And that, I think, says it all about Kathy Hill. What a fantastic mission. And that's another big reason I wanted to introduce her to University of Maryland, because, as I hope everyone in this room is aware, that's one of the big priorities we have at the University of Maryland. Kathy, I want to thank you for taking your time from a very busy schedule to come out and talk to us, and we look forward to having you back, and we look forward to your speech tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Tom, thank you very much for your comments. Kathy, I wanted to tell you that one of the things that happens around here that we're very proud of is our diversity. And in particular, we're putting an enormous amount of emphasis in doing things that will make engineering a more inviting environment for women. And in fact, the director of our Women in Engineering program is sitting in the back of the lecture hall. And I'm delighted to see so many young ladies also in the lecture hall. So this is something that we care about passionately, and perhaps we can have a conversation about this. For the benefit of the audience, as you know, every semester we have 2 lectures in this lecture series, and I just wanted to let you know what the lectures will be in the following semester, in the spring semester. We will have Ted Leonsis, founding member of AOL, the CEO of AOL, who will be here on March the 29th. He is one of the foremost entrepreneurs in the greater Washington area, very well-known person. And then we will have Art Collins, the CEO of Medtronic, on May the 3rd. As I promised, I'd like to say a few words to introduce Kathy Hill. Kathy brings more than 25 years of network engineering and management experience to her position as Senior Vice President and General Manager for Cisco's Ethernet and Wireless Technology Group. As Cisco veteran, Kathy is responsible for continued growth of Cisco's Ethernet switching and wireless LAN products and solutions across enterprise, small, medium business, and metro Ethernet networks. Cisco is the leader in the $15 billion Ethernet switching market and the enterprise wireless LAN market, with products designed to support leading-edge applications, including IP telephony and video. I want to let the audience know that this building is the only building on campus that actually uses the Cisco VoIP technology. Ms. Hill also serves as the co-leader of Cisco's Commercial Business Council and is a leading member of the Gender Diversity Council, in line with the comments that Tom made earlier, a Cisco-wide initiative promoting both gender and cultural diversity. Previously, Kathy was Vice President and General Manager for Cisco's Desktop Switching Business Unit. Under her leadership, Cisco's stackable Ethernet switch business grew to a multi-billion-dollar, with a B, run rate and achieved record market share. Prior to joining Cisco in 1997, Kathy held the position of Vice President at Ascend, a leading manufacturer of digital switches and networking products for wide area networks. And before joining Ascend, she held senior management positions at Newbridge Networks and also at Hughes Network Systems, where actually she worked very closely with Tom Scholl. Kathy Hill holds a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester. Kathy, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks so much. Wow. This better be good. I am really excited to be here today. This is such an opportunity to really meet with the future of the future leaders in technology. So I thank you for letting me be here, and thanks for all the nice words. As Tom mentioned, Bob Metcalf was here, and when Tom mentioned that to me, I was very excited because I've never met the man, and Ethernet is in my title, Ethernet is my world. And so one of the first things I did was actually go to your website and watch the video of Bob Metcalf's presentation. How many of you saw that either live or have watched it? Okay, a good number of you. So Ethernet, as my title says, Ethernet is very important to what I do at Cisco, and as Tom alluded to, kind of how, you know, as Bob explained, he had the brilliant idea to how to get to Ethernet as a protocol. He then went on and founded the company 3Com, and At that time, Ethernet was, and he described it, was really just about the basic connection, and then it was about building switching and actually how to use that switching to allow people in companies to communicate with each other now that they had desktop computers. And so 3Com was quite good at that, but I feel pretty confident saying, but Cisco really made it the business and made it the industry that it is. So I'm going to share with you a couple of things, which is really, the first and foremost is to talk about a different way to think about innovation. And I say continuous innovation here because it's really, Cisco didn't have the great idea of Ethernet. But as I said, we really have made lasting success as a company based on Ethernet. So I want to redefine innovation for you. Then I want to also share with you a little bit about what Cisco's acquisition strategy is. So you've got entrepreneurialism in the title of this lecture, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do in your startup to get Cisco to buy you. And I hope some of you are interested in that. I will tell you that I am an East Coast person. I lived in Maryland for a long time, and I decided to go west and join a startup about 11 years ago, and we were acquired very quickly. And being acquired as a startup was a very unpleasant experience for me, I would say. And I decided that I was going to go work at Cisco, spend 2 years there, and find out how I could be in the next startup that Cisco would want to buy. And that was a long time ago, 9 years. I've been at Cisco 9 years, and found lots of reasons to stay. And so that's part of what I'm going to share with you. And really the reason is because the corporate culture at Cisco is key to the success. So Cisco is the company who is the worldwide leader in routers. Routers are the equipment that transport the packets across the internet. So Cisco is the worldwide leader in kind of powering the internet, and that's what we speak about. And our initial claim to fame was in routers. We are still the leader in routers and large-scale routers, but we've actually gone on to other things. Switching is one thing that we're also the worldwide leader in. And a key part of what makes Cisco successful, I was sharing this earlier, is our financial strength. And this slide, I'm not going to use PowerPoint to drive tons of detail to you, but what this slide is showing is that in our last fiscal year, in the 12 months prior, we did almost $30 billion in revenue. That's the high bar, and you can see it was going straight up, and then it kind of took a little dip. That's what's called the post-bubble experience. But our cash, you can see, well, the lower line there is actually how much money we generate, how much profit we generate. So we sell $30 billion plus of equipment. As a company, we generate $5 billion in income, in cash, every year just by being in existence. So really that's every quarter, every 3 months, it's over $1 billion that we generate back to the company. We have $17 billion plus in cash and investments. The reason this is important, and you want to remember this if you go to a startup or the company that you work for, is that financial strength gives you the ability to make decisions, to move in the market in ways that will give you years to be successful with that change that you do. If you use all your cash to make a move, the market's going to be very unfriendly with you. And so we use this as a fundamental strength, and it's key to our acquisition strategy. So Cisco's been innovating from the beginning. Cisco, of course, was a startup. This is a little bit of a chart about the history. We're 20 years old. We're famous for, the story is, we started with routers back in, I think it says 1984, and it was a husband and wife couple at Stanford, wanted to communicate with each other in the computer lab, invented routers. So that was the very beginning. We IPO'd, took a number of years to IPO after that, and a number of years to get to really standard protocols. There were only 192 people at Cisco. Crescendo was our very first acquisition. This was an Ethernet switch company. And the team that built this, the product, they stayed at Cisco, and they're still affiliated with Cisco. And this was kind of the base, the first Ethernet switch that was done inside the company. And the continuous innovation that's been able to be done from that product to what is today a multi-billion-dollar product line is what I'm going to share with you, kind of how you do that. But it is a phenomenal success, and we inside the company use that model to apply that to everything else that we do. So some other key things in here, I would say there was a mention of voice over IP, and being able to transport voice in IP packets was an idea that's been around for a while, but again, how do you make a business out of it? And I would certainly say that Cisco's made that the technology in voice. There is virtually no investment in voice, delivering voice systems or developing voice systems other than in voice over IP. So we're pretty proud of that as well. And then we recently purchased Scientific Atlanta, which gets us into video, and that's also something pretty exciting. A wireless LAN you can see, and I was involved in that when we first decided to go off and acquire that company. So the world is changing, and Cisco feels very good about what it's done. But the world has changed in that consumers are really driving a new sense of an experience. And the consumer experience is driving the business experience. Think about it. If I go into companies and I go in to talk to them about wireless LANs and Wi-Fi, and most of them, 90% of the companies say, yeah, but I don't think it's ready. And what I say to them is, your employees have already brought in a wireless router, and it's hidden in their desk, and someone's using it because it's more convenient to them. And the air is now part of somebody's network. And so the world is changing because consumers are actually able to bring technology to the business. And so we at Cisco have to pay attention to that. And with our acquisition of Scientific Atlanta, we really took a step towards being able to add video to what we do. So really, what I'm going to talk about today is about three things: the continuous innovation and kind of the redefinition of that, the acquisition strategy, and the corporate culture that's led. These three things are what's behind Cisco's 20-plus years of really sustained success. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the product side, but clearly as a company, the sales side of any company, what we call go-to-market, is very key. So at Cisco, really the two things that made us successful over many years, one is product strategy, but the other one is a phenomenal sales team. And phenomenal leaders in our sales organizations who know how to build sales teams. So some of you, I bet, are actually going to end up in sales. You might not think that today, but it's also a great career. I'm not going to go into how Cisco's salespeople have done it. That's a whole nother hour. But I do always want to give them the recognition and the credit, because sales is very important. So let's talk about continuous innovation and really what it means. And here's where I want to pick up from the Bob Metcalfe story. So he invented Ethernet, founded 3Com, the company went off, did Ethernet switching. How did that not become the Cisco? And I also want to share with you, how do you as engineers really, how does what you do, if you're not the Bob Metcalfe, you don't invent something great, how can you have a great impact on technology and society? I didn't create Ethernet. I'm actually not a terribly creative technological person myself. I love listening to people. I love talking to people who do it. I'm actually very good at taking their ideas and making products out of them, making businesses out of them, but I can't do the first idea. And so part of what I want to share with everybody is you can still have great careers even if you're not the inventor of the great idea. Let me share with you, though, what you do need to do, because there are a lot of engineers doing different things, and it's not a given that just being a good engineer is going to lead to your success. So here's how it starts out. And so when we built Ethernet switching, and when I first joined the Ethernet switching team, we were doing pretty well, but it was by no means clear that Cisco was going to end up the leader in the switching business. We had plenty of competition. The switches that I built, we only had about 20% of the share of the market, so we were not the leader. The game was in play. What we did is we looked at protocol design, and this is one of the key things. I think a lot of you are probably engaged with protocols. Implementing protocols can be done well, they can be done exceptionally well, or they can be done just okay. And so many companies in networking actually failed because their engineers implemented protocols in anything except the most exceptional way. And the real example here is that when you implement a protocol, if you don't implement it to be totally kind of expect the unexpected, use fundamentally good computer science design principles, you will find your products having problems and not being able to be used in all kinds of applications. So at Cisco, I would say our switches, we implemented those protocols extremely well, and it was used in all kinds of applications, and we had very little kind of problems in terms of debugging. So we were able to spend more and more time moving forward rather than correcting mistakes. And you have to standardize these things because customers do not want to be locked into proprietary solutions. So at some point, you have to take all of your innovations and go back to the standards world. Combine that with technology advances, and I reference Moore's Law here, because fundamental to Ethernet switching, or to Ethernet switching in the way Cisco does it, is the use of ASICs, so programmable silicon. And we have been able to ride the technology curve and continually invest, continually build. And as the silicon technology allowed us to put more and more into the same size chip, which means the same cost for our products, we've been able to deliver phenomenally more capability to our customers. And we have ridden that curve very fast. So we have spent, today we spend probably $400 million in investment in switching engineering teams to keep that going. Now, even as I say that, I think that's daunting. $400 million just to keep switching product lines going. But that's what it costs to really stay on top of this technology. It's actually, we obviously have a fine return on that $400 million. But riding the technology advances is really key. So it is still about technology, even now in 2006. Our teams are very excited about what 65 nanometer ASIC technology is going to allow us to do and allow us to provide and really change. Every time we go to a new technology in ASICs, we actually change what Ethernet switching means. So combining those things with engineering excellence, as I said, is key. And then you have to add to it customer relevance. And so I haven't mentioned this as much yet, but everything that we do at Cisco is for our customers' success. So we as a company do not believe in technology for technology's sake. So it makes us a very hard university research partner. I will confess, I'll be honest about that. We want to get better at that. We want to add university research to us. But we are first and foremost about understanding how technology can make our customers successful. And so the customer relevance, as you think about switching, when we started in around 93 and we're now in 2006, we've had 13 years of building newer, better switches. How do you know what to do? And we go out and we talk to our customers. And customers tell us what they need for their businesses to be successful. But it turns out that you really can't believe your customers. So they will tell you what to do, but they will lead you astray if you just follow them. But that's the good news, because there's great career opportunities in people such as yourselves who understand how to listen to customers, know what engineers can build, and have the aha to say, that's the product we should build. That's the product that is going to make us wildly successful. So it's a combination of listening and really understanding what the customer needs and what they will buy, because they're telling you fundamentally what they will buy if you do it for them. Again, don't listen to them. Don't follow them too closely, but know what engineering can do and build the product. And this has been absolutely key to 13 years of building switching. The next step, it's called product lifecycle management, and it sounds pretty dull and boring. But this is actually my favorite step, because this is about how you take the excellent engineering and knowing what product you're supposed to build, and again and again and again, building that product and being able to have customers want to buy it, want to buy it, want to buy it. A lot of our customers have bought Cisco switching, every 3 years. They rip it out, put a new one in, rip it out, put a new one in. But really what they're doing is not ripping it out. And that concept of ripping it out is really what we very much frown on as product developers, because no customer can afford to continually reinvest in their business processes and training their employees in how to use this technology. So the technology has got to be evolutionary in its change, not revolutionary. There are very rare instances where the business world can afford to take on revolutionary technology. Again, that's something you want to keep in mind. Revolution is good, but it's got to pay for itself. It absolutely has to pay for itself, otherwise it's just a flash in the pan. And there's been plenty of technologies that did that. So you have to take your engineering, you have to take your product definition, and you have to say, how can the customer who's already bought and is already running a fantastic network, how are they going to be able to absorb this new change that I've come up with? Voice over IP is an example. How are they going to be able to actually adopt this? Or Wi-Fi technology, how are they going to be able to use it? And we spend a lot of our cycles as engineers, as management, thinking about how a customer will buy a particular feature. And this is, again, I think, a key to Cisco's success. And coming back to Bob Metcalf, and he mentioned that, he was brilliant at marketing, but perhaps not in the top 1%. And I would say that I agree with him. It is phenomenally hard to make these right product decisions and know how to transition your products. But being able to do that has been key to Cisco's success. So you think about this, and what we've done as we've thought about it at Cisco is we've actually come up with two very different types of products in switching. So we've said, we have to build both very complex, big iron products, which are first to market with any features, so that our customers really can get the best products. But then we recognize we also have there's also a place for very high volume and very high quality products for those customers that just want to get in and purchase something and not go for the big iron. And so what this represents is how you actually run multi-billion dollars of business of product lines, is you do it across a wide spectrum of things. And again, this is something I think Cisco has done very well in terms of taking innovation and driving it in. The challenge that you've gotten, if you've read books, have you guys read the Jeffrey Moore books? Is that something that you teach in terms of crossing the chasm, or I think it was Clay Christensen about innovation cycles. And there's a belief that the first to market type of innovators can never follow on because they'll be disrupted, because they get distracted. And at Cisco, I think we prevent this from happening because of our organizational design. So we design our teams that build products into business units. Everybody typically does that. But we've really kept them very manageable in size so that normal human beings can manage them. These are teams of anywhere from 200 to 400 people. And you can find lots of people who can manage that size of team. And we keep them very focused and results-oriented. So every business unit leader has essentially a target market that is measurable. And measurable where you can actually know every quarter how you're doing. And it's measurable because the industry has a market share for that particular piece of the industry. And you can always measure how well you're doing. As I mentioned, in switching in the early days, we were in the low end here, we were at 20% market share. So that was a very measurable goal. The goal of that business unit was to get to above 50, was to be clearly number one. And we could continue to measure it because the business unit was focused on that. The business unit has a market share and a total revenue number that they go after. And they feel very, very incented. It's something to rally around. It's great. And you can be very focused. And in that way, it's very much like an individual startup. Each individual business unit, because they have very uniquely identifiable goals, very measurable goals, and they build product lines, and they are responsible for many years of building the product lines. It ends up that it makes up a product portfolio, and this is an example of what the product portfolio for switching looks like. I had to put them all on one chart so you can't see the beauty of all the engineering inside of them. But at the high end, the Catalyst 6500, those chips, those boards, just a single board in there can cost well over $5,000 to build. There are many, many, many very high-end ASICs in there costing a lot of money. So there's a lot of cool technology that goes into it. It's a very broad portfolio, but that's really the way that Cisco's been able to do it. And here's what success looks like. So another little chart to read, and I have to stand over here to read it. In switching, just in switching, our revenues, the market for switching, selling switches to businesses, right now today, there'll be $15 billion sold if you look back for the last 12 months. And Cisco is that blue line in terms of share. So we're at over 70% of the market of that money comes to Cisco for Ethernet switching. Perhaps most importantly is the fact that the lower lines are our competitors. So this is what being number one in your market looks like. Being number one in market because you gave customers what they wanted, because you took great ideas and continued to innovate, continue to give them what they needed to solve business problems. So right now today, switching is the majority of Cisco's revenue, and routers are a close second to this. So very proud of that. Now, you can't, so switching, what Cisco faced a few years ago was, well, switching's great, routing's great, but we got to keep going. I mean, we need to continue to grow. Our stockholders want us to grow, and more importantly, we think we can grow. How do we do it? So this is a chart that describes the thinking that we use when we decide to go after new businesses and develop in businesses. Has anybody seen charts like this? I don't know if you use them. We partnered with, in this case, actually, it was with Jeffrey Moore to come up with this. But the idea is that you can invent. You have a great idea, you invent it. The next thing you have to do is scale it. You have to take it and go from one idea to something that really is deployable, that customers will buy. And that's a big engineering challenge in and of itself. And if you've got all the right stuff going for you then you go and you make it a real big business. And when it's in that big business phase, you're optimizing. You're making yourself more efficient. You're thinking about your customers. What's the next product that I'm going to do? A lot of what I just talked about was more in the optimize kind of category. And then at some point, if no one wants to buy it anymore, you have to offload your investment in there. And so we think about all the different technologies, businesses, and we kind of, inside Cisco, either ones we're in or ones we're thinking about getting into, we categorize them this way. And what that means is that we would put today switching and routing in the optimized category. We've created a new set of technologies that we develop called advanced that are in the scaling. And those are things that I've talked about. That's voice over IP, the wireless networking, and all we're doing in security, in network security. Those are all in the advanced stage. And then we recently began to focus much more on emerging technologies. And this is very much in the invent stage. We set ourselves a bar that in the advanced technology, those things, we need to know how to get to $1 billion in sales for them. But in emerging, those are the things that we say, well, we're not exactly sure where these are going. And a lot of our video technologies, we've got some very cool things we're doing in video. And those are in the emerging technologies area. A lot of adjacent markets to switching and routing will exist here. And we're playing around with a lot of new ideas. And we as Cisco are also willing to say that a lot of our product ideas in this emerging area can fail. So that's something we never used to allow ourselves to do. But we're trying to take a lot more risk and not also have the employees, have the engineers who work on these technologies feel that they failed if their ideas aren't ones that we go to market with. So it's an important cultural change for us. So an example, I alluded to it earlier, of how we use this is when we reinvented the industry that was the voice industry. So TDM, PBX, that's a 6-letter term for what used to be the old phone systems. And that was clearly the case where companies were just milking their investments in it. Nothing was happening there. I mean, when was the last time before voice over IP that you got something new and cool in your voice system? We looked at that, and we actually applied some invention and then scaled and are currently in the process of scaling this. The invention was really to say, well, voice can just be IP. It can run over one network. And we really have a vision. The vision of Cisco is that the network is the enabler. And one common network using IP is actually the going to provide the connectivity needed for all of the new experiences, be they business or consumer. And so with that vision in mind, we took voice. We now have a whole set of products and system solutions for customers called Unified Communications. And you mentioned you have the voice over IP system. And I saw you had the video integrated into it. There's many things now making this possible. We talked to the AT&Ts, the Verizon type of companies, and we say, well, you know what this voice over IP is going to let you do? It's going to let you sell more services to your customers. And an easy example is you, Mr. and Mrs. Parent, are going to have a web page where you can decide what time your children are allowed use of your phone system, of their cell phone, right? You can turn it on, you can turn it off. You can determine who they talk to. And this is all very easy to do once you're in a digital IP world. And it took a while in the US for service providers to think, yeah, I want to do that. This is where actually innovation outside the US is happening much faster in these kinds of areas, because the service providers outside the US see a lot of the potential here and are willing to move much quicker. But this is an area where we applied this invention. So then we said, well, what's next? Video, fun technology. So we would say video was also in this kind of old stage, although cable TV was good. Cable TV was great, but it was really about TV. And the invention there was getting the cabling and the boxes, the set-top boxes, into you all. Now, video conferencing has been around forever, not well done, and video surveillance has been around, perhaps not well utilized. So we looked at all of these, again, applied some invention, and we've scaled that up to where we talk about video convergence. And I won't really bore you with all of our wonderful products here, but I do think you're going to start to see that video in the business workplace is going to become more and more the means of communication. Again, because we can take video and make it basically IP traffic, which means that the means by which you establish a video conference are the same means by which you call somebody. So it's the same, you just dial a phone number, and the phone number happens to have video attached to it, and the video pops up. It simplifies all of the investment that businesses have to make in being able to provide different types of technology. So, lots of ways in which we have used innovation really to drive the business. And what I want to leave you with is the thought that, that developing these businesses is really about continuing to innovate. We use acquisitions, though, very freely inside the company. We're well known for acquiring companies, and it is key to us. Acquisitions, partnerships, and in-house development. Those are three kind of equal legs on the stool of what we do as Cisco. Our acquisitions, we have an acquisition strategy that's based on this. So this is the slide if you want to know what do you have to do. So you have to have a short-term win-win for both the small company and Cisco, and a long-term win-win. I shouldn't say small company because it could just as well be a large company, as was the example with Scientific Atlanta and Linksys also. So, but what the significance of that is that we are not looking for a partner in addition to us, which is only going to be useful in the short term. Right? We actually do take much more of a long-term vision. So it's got to be sustainable technology advantage to us. Chemistry and execution. So I'm going to talk more about Cisco, the company, and kind of our culture. But when we go and talk to a company, the team that goes out and talks to them has to feel really good about the people. You know, you have to say, I connect with these guys. I get it. And because we know, we've had some acquisitions that didn't work. We know that if it's forced, if you feel kind of, if it's not an immediate kind of bonding of, of people, then there's probably something about that says it won't have long-term advantage. Shared vision. This is, of course, important that you see the world evolving in the same way. And really the meaning behind that has changed over the years. It used to be that the world was not clear that even that IP was going to be the common transport. ATM was very popular. Many other things were very popular. So we used to say we wanted people kind of with shared vision about IP. But nowadays, it can be more about, the importance of video. So it changes as time goes by. And then geographic proximity. This is just a practical thing, which we try not to, as a company, spread ourselves too thin. We know, again, through experience, that it's just important to think about where you go. And so there are fundamentally two different ways in which we look at acquisitions, either to get into a new market or to enhance our standing in an existing market. And so in the new market entry, as an example, I mentioned Scientific Atlanta, which is the set-top box maker for your home cable system. Scientific Atlanta and Motorola are the two primary developers of this. But as it says here, one of the first and most important things there is to acquire leadership. So Cisco has a mantra, which is that we must be number one or number two in any industry that we're in. And we know that because it goes all the way back to that financial strength, that if you're not that player, then you're going to have a hard time having long-term success. So sometimes when we enter a new market, we just want to be the market leader, and sometimes it only makes sense to acquire the number one or number two. In the market expansion case, and I can speak directly to this one, I have responsibility for the wireless LAN business. And we started that with an acquisition in '99. That was a new market entry. We weren't in that. We acquired a company called Aeronet in Ohio. So the geographic proximity was one which had us scratching our head because we certainly didn't have big presence in Ohio at that time. We were in that market for several years. We developed products. But the market was evolving, the technology was evolving faster than we could, with our own engineering base, develop and grow. So we were building a multi-hundred-million-dollar business very quickly. We had about 200 people in it. But the industry, the startups, the venture capitalists like Tom here, were fueling so much money into driving companies developing these technologies that in order for us to ensure our number one position, we actually had to go out and acquire another company in wireless to get the next level, the next generation of technology brought in-house and us able to deploy that very quickly. That was a company called Airspace. That was actually one of Cisco's largest acquisitions in recent, other than the very large Scientific Atlanta. We acquired Airspace for over $400 million, which was hugely successful for the startup. And they have actually come into Cisco. They're in my group, and we have the leadership of that team with us and really driving that business to get to $1 billion. So in those cases, we actually we were strengthening our current advantage. We were already pretty much close to number one, but I think we had about 40% market share. We now have 65% market share about 18 months later after having acquired Airspace. And it's very key to us that we be able to acquire them and then retain that and be able to continue to grow that. So retaining that is key. So here's kind of a little bit of a list. You can see since 2002, we've actually done, I think it was on an earlier slide, 110 acquisitions. It's actually a little bit more now. Over 100 acquisitions in Cisco's history. And they fall into the two categories. And you can see clearly more of our acquisitions are in market expansion because there we're cherry picking, so to speak, technologies and solutions that fit into our existing business. So people absolutely critical. This is probably another slide that Cisco can be extremely proud of, which is the fact that most of the people in the companies we acquire stay at Cisco. In fact, in over 15 years, almost half of the people we acquired are still at Cisco. And somebody said something to me here about, joining Cisco. There was a time when, in the mid to late 90s, when almost all new Cisco employees were acquired. Truly. I was one of those crazy people who actually submitted a resume and got hired, and I was very much an unusual entity in the company. And actually, when I went and joined the business unit that was doing Ethernet switching, I'd been at the company about 10 months and decided to change my position, what I was doing. And I went and joined this team. And the team was the start of a company that we acquired called Junction Networks. Now, the funny thing is, they were an Ethernet switching startup. They were the people that worked with Bob Metcalfe at 3Com, who went off after they all left 3Com, and they went off and started Junction Networks. They invented fast Ethernet and really invented, I would say, Ethernet switching. So that was the team I went in and joined. I joined them, and I was the first person they had ever had join them in, I think, 3 years, who was from Cisco. Everyone else they just hired, and they didn't quite know what to do with an internal Cisco person. So it's a little bit different today. Today I think it's probably more, we hire more people than we acquire, but it's still, we acquire quite a lot of talent. And so it's very important to us to be able to retain it. So that's kind of a high-level summary of how we look at our acquisitions. We're looking for short-term and long-term wins, new market entries, or market expansion. So any of those can be good opportunities for us. So the last piece I want to talk about, and then hopefully we can have some back and forth questions from you guys, is about the company culture. And I really think that it's just as important as our innovation, our acquisition to Cisco's success, the fact that we have a very, very strong and positive corporate culture. And it begins with the people. And so as I mentioned about our acquisitions, the people are very important to our acquisition strategy. So what I'm showing up here is actually, that is a badge. I don't have my badge on today, but everybody in the company, wears the little clip with their picture on it, and it's the badge, the magnetic card that gets you in anywhere. But we also have this badge. And this is what our Cisco culture is. And this is not just a card, and I wish I could impress upon you, I wish I could share with you just how real this is. Just the fact that everybody wears it, I mean, we're almost 50,000 people, so that's pretty significant. I've talked about a number of these things. This, in other words, what we say to all of our employees, and as managers, as leaders of the company, it's our job to make sure that everything up here is real. So this has to be real. This has to be infused in what we do. I've talked about innovation. No technology religion. So this is truly important, whether it be IP or ATM. We build ATM products. So we would not go in and tell our customers, man, are you insane to think about using ATM? IP is going to win. Maybe the rogue person did that. But as a company, we would say, we're just here to give you the best solution that you want. This is a very relevant issue today in wireless technology. We sell a lot of Wi-Fi equipment and Wi-Fi technology, and WiMAX is very prevalent. There's a lot of discussion about WiMAX. So we will have an opinion about that as a technology, but we will absolutely say that if that's what our customers need, we will absolutely build that. So it's important for us not to have technology religion. And I've talked about a number of these. So customer success is the foundation of everything. And again, everybody at Cisco knows that if we don't deliver what our customers want to buy, we're not in the game. And as engineers also, the Cisco sales force is very powerful. And we know that if we build products and they don't want to sell them, we're in the wrong business. We've got to go change something. And our sales force knows they have to face the customer day after day. They know what they want. This is an interesting one. This is one of my very personal favorites, is empowerment. Truly, employee empowerment is alive and well inside Cisco. And when I joined the company, I had a very negative view of, big corporate, yuck. I just joined the startup. It was fun. I could do anything I wanted. I was vice president of engineering. Now I'm a director of engineering. I just don't want to be in a company and be told what to do. Well, I learned very quickly that actually employee empowerment at Cisco means we don't tell our employees what to do. We expect employees to think for themselves. We expect you to own your career. We expect you to be accountable for building products that customers want. There is no they there. You don't hear people say, oh, they did this, that mysterious, I don't know what they're thinking about. I don't get what they're thinking about. That kind of stuff really doesn't exist because it's just us. It's just every employee. I mean, we all have employee stock options, so of course we're owners in the company. But more importantly is that sense that we are empowered to go out and build the products we think should be built, to have the argument with everybody about what, some policy or something. I mean, we have some famous examples in the company of where the employee population said, excuse me, you got that wrong. One example, very famous, and it relates to frugality, because we are a very frugal company. But we do give away sodas and water, and it used to just be sodas. And the CEO several years ago said, well, yeah, I think it's time, frugality. Enough of that giving away sodas, and took all the free sodas away. Well, they came back very quickly. There was basically a work stoppage, and they came back. But the real message here is that it was heard. Okay, got it, right. So sometimes you make mistakes, but everybody speaks up. And so that open communication is absolutely key. And part of the open communication is that leaders are expected inside Cisco to be able to take all of the items on this card and infuse them and make them real in their teams. And everybody knows that's a fair expectation for you to have for whoever you work for. Really, by doing this, by making everybody in the company understand that this is what we're about, it really creates camaraderie, it creates common purpose, it reduces the number of arguments. Change is another one there, drive change. Change is really, really hard. And sometimes at Cisco, we just, we say, oh, you aren't really going to change that or something. But we know that it actually makes us stronger by all of us acknowledging we can deal with change. We understand change is built in to everything we do, and so we accept it. So by having that as part of our culture, we don't have to argue about that a lot. Okay, so that is really it. So in summary, here's some kind of fun facts for you to take away in thinking about Cisco. $3.8 billion in R&D investment. I mentioned $400 million in switching. So there's a whole lot more happening inside the company other than switching. 17,000 engineers. There are also 17,000 salespeople. But we have 10 major labs around the world. We're number one in most markets in which we compete, and we're number one and number two in almost everything. We've acquired over 100 companies, and we do invention through patents, 2,300 patents. So we do believe in intellectual property rights and protecting our intellectual property and having a strong patent portfolio. Major innovations, multi-protocol routing and switching, which means, therefore, that we have innovated and provide most of what connects businesses, corporations, as well as the Internet. And we're pretty proud of that. Voice over IP, wireless, I mentioned. And then largest contributor to IETF and IEEE. So again, giving it all back to the standards bodies and saying that, for example, with voice over IP, here's how we did it. We want anybody's phone to work with our call system. We want anybody's call system to work with our phones. We don't want our customers to feel locked in, and so we give back in that sense. Okay, so you guys are the future, and you're new. You got new ideas, new technology, and can't wait for you guys to get out there and bring great things to us. So hopefully I shared with you a new way to think about innovation, something about how your companies can be acquired by Cisco, the importance of company culture, and if there are any questions, be glad to take them.
We have a few minutes for questions and comments. Could you talk a little bit about how your sales team works with your engineers, and maybe how, you talk about how your continuous innovation and how you keep your customers up with your innovations so that you don't leave them wondering what you're doing?
Well, that's a great question, because keeping ourselves in front of customers as engineers is the way we do it. So the sales teams bring customers to us a lot. We have something called the Executive Briefing Center built around the world. I'm out of San Jose. We have, most of our engineering is done in San Jose still. And the sales teams arrange with customers to come to San Jose and for an entire day, spend a day hearing from all of the different engineering teams about what's happening. Now, really, it's a two-way conversation, and that's the primary way where engineers hear about what their customers want. In addition, as I described, the product definition, the customer ownership, the product management teams spend half their time understanding what the field is experiencing. So their job is to know that. But as engineers, truly, the exciting part is when the customer comes to you able to do it. And so how they hear about what we're doing is largely through that as well. So we do demonstrate in these centers, we demonstrate all the different technology, and they can come in and see it. And we try and, when you see communication in the press from Cisco, we try and actually disclose very, very much up front what we're doing. And lately we do that pretty aggressively. For a while we used to kind of hide things, but now we're very much think it's to everybody's advantage for us to share more of it. So we just come out and tell you what the emerging technologies are. For the most part, we share those. Okay? Other questions?
Do you want to say something about your failures in the acquisition process?
Okay, so for those of you who didn't hear the question, was about say something about our failures in the acquisition process. Sure. We don't even. I don't know that. I don't have a list of here's the acquisitions we would say failed. I think what I can tell you is that there are some acquisitions where when technology was changing a lot, and we. Here's an example. The technology that we're no longer in is DSL. So Cisco acquired several companies as well as building its own DSL access devices, whether it's switch or the actual CPE. And today we're actually not in that business at all. And there I would say, that was not a business that we could make successful for us. We couldn't be number one or number two in that business. And even though we tried with technology, we tried with partnerships, we just never could get there. And so, in some cases it's that due to technology. Some cases you might say we failed because the product that we acquired isn't shipping. But usually the people are still around and kind of the thinking is still there. So I think those are the main things that come to mind. Largely the failure is, just the basic of not getting the return. We do set up with every acquisition a set of goals and a financial goals of what it would be. We don't always hit it because we can't always productize it. One of the big challenges with some of the new technology is being able to have our sales force sell it. And that's a very big challenge. When you have 17,000 salespeople, sometimes if you have a niche technology, we have trouble figuring out how to, even though it's great, how to get them to deliver all of that. Hopefully that answered that. Sure.
Is there a danger at all in the future that the switches and the boxes that you make for communications are going to become more commodity items like cell phones? And so there's going to be a lot of pressure to do offshore manufacturing where, in a way, the box is a minuscule part of your overall costing. And so you're going to really become an intelligent software company and the manufacturing will be done somewhere else.
The question was, if I can maybe restate it. So what about the threat of commoditization into Ethernet switching and the value being more in software there than in the hardware? So this is something I live and breathe every day. This is constant concern. As long as the technology advances, allow us to put more and more into our chips, into our ASICs, which are fundamentally at the heart of Ethernet switching, and we can do it in such a way that the customer finds relevance, we will not be commoditized. Commoditized meaning that anybody can build the switch. Anybody being any average set of engineers can go off and build it. And the message that I give to my teams over and over and over again when they complain sometimes about things being hard, or you must be kidding, we're not going to do that, is, if anybody could do it, we are not going to pay you what we pay you to do this. That is just a fact. If I can go offshore, if I can go anywhere and get built what customers want, and I don't need kind of this best and brightest engineering organization. As a company, we would do that. That would be crazy not to, right? So that's a message to drive people developing products to say you have to be different. You have to be doing better. There have been times in these 13 years in building Ethernet switching when we thought maybe we're done. But we're not, and it's because we're really solving business problems. And the Ethernet switch of today doesn't look like it did before. So we're solving business problems. Technology, underlying technology, is still evolving in a way that we can continue to provide more at the same price. And that's what keeps us from being commoditized. Sure.
I have a question back then you said a lot about switching technology, and I guess back then you mentioned switching technology, so you don't have many options that make you confused. But nowadays, when we're a student, now you say that we have all the future open, like video conferencing and picture, image analyzing. And you say the key to success is Cisco is a product strategy and sales team. Back then you was a math major, how can you transpose to something to one of these two fields? And it's very hard to combine technology and business. So for us, even the rest of the model, because we have too many options. And so my question is that for the source strategy winning, how can we market ourselves to get a Cisco? For our strategy, how can you say success and go on?
So how can you market yourself, and how did I, as a math person, end up kind of as part of this? So on the personal note, I would say that, again, as I shared with you right at the beginning, I don't invent. I just am not the kind of person, and Tom knows this. I work for Tom, by the way, that invents these great ideas. But what Cisco gave me, being part of this business unit that was very focused, and I had many years of experience coming up to it. So I'd seen failures, I'd seen good and bad, I'd seen myself succeed and fail, and I was able to see a view of a business, the business unit view, right? So if you're a team of, and at that time it was 130 people, we talk about it. You talk about these things. That's not a huge team. Even at Cisco, the business units today still take their, kind of put your blinders on, and it's just that one world. And so I was able to take the background and all the experience I had developing, so I went from a math major to a software engineer to a manager type of thing. But developing those things, I spent lots of nights in customers' premises, solving network problems, debugging problems. So all those things, managing people, all those things leading up to being part of a team that said, this is a business problem, really, those kinds of things. That was kind of how it worked for me. I think the best thing as someone coming out of school to do is to be very focused on solving problems and knowing how what you do is relevant to your company day after day after day. And you should expect your managers to tell you that. So you should be able to come out, even if you work at Cisco with 50,000 people, and say, how is what I'm thinking about and solving today helping this company be a better company? And that is that relevance of what you're doing to the company's success. Just keep focused on that. I think that's absolutely important. I think the other thing is, honestly, follow your passion. And it's up there, do it with passion. So in whichever way you feel passionate, whether it's being the guy who creates this great idea, or being the person who goes out and talks to customers and figures out how to build things, or if it's being the engineer who knows how to implement protocols, who knows fundamentally how to write fabulous software or build fabulous ASICs. Whatever you're best at, just do that. I mean, stay with that, because that's, we're really lucky. We're in such an exciting field in technology. There is a lot of opportunity. You can afford to do what you love.
I have a question, Kathy. It was not too long ago we had a company called AT&T in this country that provided all telephone services, and they decided consciously to create an organization they called Relevance that is responsible for some of the most influential inventions of the 20th century. Inventions that we use in our everyday lives, and inventions that have led to enormous economic development around the world. You think about the world without the transistor. That entity didn't make really much money for AT&T, but I think it did for a lot of other organizations, and quite frankly, it did a lot of good for humanity. Now I see your numbers, the cash flow, an enormous cash flow, and enormous cash reserve. Tell us whether at Cisco there's ever been any discussion about possibly creating an entity similar to Bell Labs that focuses on basic research, that recruits some of the best minds of the world and turns them loose to develop the next transistor.
So great question, and I probably cannot do justice as the Cisco representative to the full answer, but let me give you a few comments here. And I pulled back to this screen because it says giving back. And Cisco is very active in something called network academies in the world, so in many different geographies. And what we're doing there is trying to train people in how to be network engineers. It's not exactly the research piece, but through our, I would say, partly through what we say is acquisitions, and the door is open. You know, we want to get in into new businesses. We do allow that. In terms of supporting and funding research, I honestly don't know where the best to be able to do that. I don't know we would bring the right thinking to that. So again, we really need to try and partner with the universities and really get better at that. And I think that's very much of our next step, is to be able to do that. But we do try and ensure a healthy technological environment. Cisco is a very vocal believer that employees should own part of the business, and we are very passionate about some of the regulations on employee stock options, and perhaps there will be a time when we can't do that, when companies cannot have employees as owners of their business because of the regulatory. And I think that is going to stifle innovation and research in this country, certainly. And so we're trying to fight that. So we're trying to address the issue that you said, but possibly in the best way that's possible for us as a company. Okay? One more?
Maybe one last question.
Yep, up here.
How do you balance encouraging freedom and innovation with employees and giving them enough structure so that they can succeed?
Great question. So how do you balance asking employees to innovate and the structure to succeed? We absolutely focus on the structure. So we very much provide the structure and want people working inside businesses to do that, to work on ideas, work on things inside the construct of a business unit. So unlike some other big tech companies where we very much believe in everybody working to develop a product. Now the innovation and the ideas we stimulate through all kinds of other things. We have something called nerd lunches. We have a wiki kind of site where everybody's sharing their ideas, and very cool things are happening there. But we do focus everybody on building products fundamentally. So, okay.
Thank you very much, Kathy.
Thank you.
I really appreciate a wonderful talk. A very, very informative talk, very insightful, beautiful delivery. Thank you so much for taking time from a very busy schedule. In recognition of your technical and business achievements and your leadership in the field of Ethernet and wireless technology, I have a little thing to give you. This is what we call the Clark School's Technology Business Leadership Award.
Oh,
so
wow.
little recognition.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again, and thank you for coming. Happy holidays to all of you, and we'll see you next semester. Thanks.